Greetings. You did not click on Double Life, Youth Leader by Day, Batman by Night with Michael Sinn. But you clicked on St. Paul's podcast Beyond the Sermon, where we go beyond the words that were said in the sermon on Sunday. I am not your host, Michael Sinn, as he is recovering from running a half marathon while he is also on his way visiting family for Thanksgiving. But I'm your fill-in host, Pastor Josh. And by process of elimination, with me today is Pastor Smith. Say hello to the people in sign language, Pastor.
I did it.
Yeah, you couldn't hear it, but he did it. With our growing through the Bible schedule, this week especially, we have some very interesting readings. In fact, our reading for today, which as of recording, we're recording on Tuesday, we have 3 very fascinating readings. In fact, we had the Nebuchadnezzar becoming like a wild animal.
One of my favorites.
Oh, it's so good. And then the other day I was actually trying to remember. I'm like, where is that story about the handwriting on the wall? And then I was surprised when I realized it's right after the Nebuchadnezzar turning into a wild animal. And then Daniel and the lion's den. So 3 very different yet cool stories. So my first question for you is, was there one of the other texts in this week's readings that you were considering preaching on? And if so, what route might you have gone?
All of them, really. Yeah. Well, not really the Nebuchadnezzar turning into a beast.
No?
That was not really in consideration, but maybe for the children's message I was thinking about it. No, I was definitely considering any of the Daniel / Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego stories. But later this week we're going to read most of the book of Nehemiah. And I was initially thinking about the Nehemiah story because it's not as well known. I think several of the stories in Daniel are very well known. Mm-hmm. And I thought that, this Nehemiah story of here's part of the exiles returning to Jerusalem, and he's rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem, and there's just a lot going on with that story. I did consider initially this could be, because I did want us to have a theme. I wanted to portray accurately, I believe, Christians as exiles, or God's people as exiles, being strangers in a strange world throughout all of history. And I thought, I could work with that from the exiles returning to Jerusalem, and then now they're rebuilding. And I thought about, you could do this kind of rebuilding on different levels of they were literally rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, but toward the end of the Nehemiah story, they gather everybody and they start rebuilding their lives, so to speak, on the Word of God. They have this public reading of God's law, kind of similar to what you talked about last week with Josiah. Mm-hmm. Hey, it's like different generations will kind of rediscover God's truth, and we've seen different times of that in history too. Sometimes in America we'll call this like a revival. We'll use that language. So I thought, we could talk about, hey, when your life has crumbled and just been broken down and destroyed, how do you start to rebuild it like the exiles did? Well, you rebuild it with the Word of God. And I thought, there's probably something there, but it wasn't this sermon from this past week. That'll be maybe a future sermon.
Yeah.
So that was in the mix, as well as some other particular Daniel stories too.
Lots of good options for sure. My next question is about your opening illustration and hopefully law enforcement doesn't get involved, but where you talked about you took an elderly woman from her home and then dropped her off somewhere other than her home. I'm sort of kidding, but tell us about your illustration.
Yeah, not entirely true.
It's like a bad movie. Michael does bad movie descriptions. The bad sermon illustration description.
I have been not necessarily saving, but kind of saving this story. My family and I, we used to, from when I was about as little as I can remember, we used to volunteer at nursing homes because my pastor would do he would do some on Sunday afternoons, sometimes Wednesday mornings, like a chapel service at this particular nursing home, and my mom would play the piano, and then my mom would drag my brother and me, and sometimes my dad too, along, and she'd make us sing. But we would what we do is we would have to go through the nursing home and get people to come to the chapel and then bring them back to their rooms after. And I think when I was a kid, I didn't always know. Well, and they didn't have these like memory care wings of nursing homes in the 90s, or at least not in this nursing home. They didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're just learning about the world, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm starting to learn about the nature of Alzheimer's, dementia, and so I knew that some of the residents that had those those diseases, and so this one particular woman though, I just remember that there was always this sign by her door, because I think it was it said, Ethel, this is your home, and I think because she would get confused, and that's, I think people get confused, if they're just right away when they have to move to a new place, right? Sometimes that's kind of a jarring thing. But when you have Alzheimer's, you need that reminder, right? Like where you live now, where is your home? And I just remember when I said, oh, here's your home, and she's like, this is your home. She said, no, it isn't. And I didn't really know what to say.
Wait, you're Ethel. This is
yeah, you are Ethel though, right? It says this is your home. And so as I reflect upon that, it's just like, because there are times where Christians, I think today, think, this is my home. This doesn't feel like my home. Mm-hmm. This feels like a pretty strange world that I live in. And, the exiles, hey, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Babylon, this is your home now. No, it isn't. Mm-hmm. The exiles return to Jerusalem, and the wall, it's all rubble, and it doesn't feel the same way. And they've rebuilt the temple, not as great as it used to be. This is your home. No, it isn't. So it reminded me of Ethel, and I did think it was a little bit risky to start off the sermon with a story where I mildly poked fun at a woman with Alzheimer's. I don't think I lost the entire crowd right away, but
no,
yeah.
I don't think so either.
But I think she, I spoke about her in a positive, like I think in a very real and powerful way. It was accurate for her to say, this isn't my home. This nursing home, this little room, this isn't my home. So I think it cohered with the general message that we can be like Ethel, and we can be like the Israelites, and cry out, I want to go home. I want to go to my real home.
Yeah. No, I think you did a good job of fleshing that out. So, yeah. All right. So in this sermon, what was the problem that you sought to identify?
Well, I wanted to. I think sometimes there will be debates about, is this a Christian nation? Or you'll see polls internationally. How many people believe in God? How many Christians are there? I think largely those polls and those statistics are bogus.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes, worldwide, 2/3 of people still identify as Christian. I would push back and be like, well, okay, do they believe in some kind of higher power, or do they really believe in the triune God? Do they believe in the God that became incarnate in Jesus Christ? That number is going to dwindle way down if you start to zoom in on those things. And I think it's just better to be realistic and to acknowledge that Christians, we'll just say, just even in America, we're the minority. Active, faithful, Bible-believing Christians are in the minority, and you cannot convince me otherwise. And that when we have that perspective on, I am an exile, it envelops you into the story of God's people from the very beginning. I've talked about that. Really, ever since Eden, we've never had a home. Now, there's a tension there because we do have a home, and I talked about that in the rest of the sermon. Like, if you go too far the other way and think, well, this isn't my home, it doesn't matter. I'm just looking to get away from this veil of tears, and it doesn't matter what I do here. Heaven is the only thing that matters. Like that's also not quite what I was trying to say either. I've used this line. I don't know if I've said this to you or on this podcast before or not, but there's a reason why when you come to faith, you don't immediately ascend into heaven. There is a reason why God still has us exist and do things in this world, even though it's a broken, sinful world, and it's going to be recreated someday into our eternal home. It's still, life in this world still matters, but there's that tension between, like, we can be like, well, this is my home. It's kind of my not home, and I'm longing to be home with the Lord, restored Eden someday. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but I think we need to veer into that tension and accept our identity as God's people, exiles, strangers, sojourners. There's a lot of different synonyms that the Bible uses for us. Pilgrims is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of, I think that was the problem, and then trying to navigate that is, if that's a reality, then which way am I going to go? Am I going to compromise with the world, with what the world says is right? Am I going to tear it all down and launch an overthrow, launch a revolution? Or is there some kind of a middle ground that we can find from Daniel, from Jesus? So anyway, yeah, I just blathering on. I don't know. Yeah. A lot of problems.
Well, another problem that I think you and I both are familiar with is that there's always more to be said in a sermon. You can't always find time, right? For the sake of clarity and for the sake of time, we can't include everything. So what was left unsaid from your sermon preparation?
Yeah. Oh, I could have said a lot more. The one thing, and actually, when I zeroed in on the fiery furnace story is going to be, if there was one story I was zeroing in on, that was the one. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to do more with the this conversation where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, Nebuchadnezzar says, hey, if you guys bow down, well and good, but if not, you're going to be thrown through the fiery furnace. And then they say, well, if this is true, if this is the punishment that's pending for us, we do have a God who can deliver us out of your hand, even though you've just been basically mocking our God, like he can't do that, like you're installing yourself as the almighty king that our God can't save us from. But then they say, but if not, and what they mean is, he's able to save us, but for some reason, if according to his will, he chooses not to save us, and even if we had a peek into the future, like we're going to get thrown through the furnace and we're going to burn up and die, we still are not going to bow down. We're still not going to compromise. Like, in a sense, it's like we're okay with that, because we know that ultimately, eternally, God is going to rescue us. And that just, like, gives me chills thinking about it. So we have Melissa really likes to buy like little signs to display in our house, and there's one store even in Crocker Park. It's called Altered State. It's like a Christian, so they've got Christian decor and clothing and stuff, and we've gotten a bunch of signs from there, good biblical messages and everything. But we have one sign that says, it's quoting this verse. It says, but if not, ... he is still good. So that's not, the he is still good is not from Daniel chapter 3, but it's consistent with biblical theology. and I see that, and I think about it, like how powerful that is to acknowledge, I'm going to lay out all these prayers to God, and I'm still going to acknowledge, even if he doesn't answer some or all of my prayers, he's still good. I'm still going to trust in him. And I think that's what, it's just very powerful to hear that these three guys confess their faith in the Lord, even after acknowledging the but if not. Because how many times in reality, like how often times has my faith been contingent on, like, well, I'll trust in God as long as he's going to deliver me from my present problem or something, and then maybe he doesn't, and then my faith is shaken and maybe it dies. Well, God didn't maybe he's not good. He didn't do that thing that I asked him for. These guys are all in. They're like, nope, even if we burn up, God's still good, God, and we're still trusting in God to take us home. Just love that. It's such a. Now, obviously, the story ends in a happy way.
Yeah.
But that was I would have. I think there's a whole sermon in
Yes.
there
Oh, absolutely.
about that. So again, maybe someday there's a Nehemiah sermon, and then there's this but if not sermon. Dibs.
Ah, man, I was
Yeah.
waiting for you to finish. I was waiting for you to finish before I called dibs. That's rude. All right, now for the most important question: how did you get to Jesus?
Yeah, Jesus. Well, and I did. You'll appreciate this. I did struggle a little bit with the. Oh, Jesus is with us in the fire. Or Jesus is with us in the lion's den. You can over spiritualize
Yeah.
or kind of over take that a little too far sometimes. But the visual works well. Now, I'll get real nerdy here for a minute. That there are. I feel like in some conversation, some recorded conversation, we have talked about this concept before, but there is there are a lot of people that think whenever the phrase "the angel of the Lord" is mentioned in the Old Testament, that it is a reference to the Son of God. And so there are people that would say, well, that was actually the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, the we would say the pre-incarnate Christ, that was the fourth man in the fire. I didn't have time I would have felt like I needed an extra 5 minutes to make a case for that, and it wasn't going to be worth it, I thought, in a sermon.
Yeah, I get that.
It's just enough. Functionally, how much different is it if it was just an angel or if it was the Son of God that was in the fire? But you can, there's more you could say about that, like just Jesus doesn't shy away from dangerous spots, that he needs to go to save his people, I guess. The most dangerous one being the cross. But that's kind of how I got to Jesus. Was he's the one who he ultimately does suffer on our behalf so that we can get home eventually. But not only that, we can bank on him being with us in those difficult spots where we're being called to acknowledge him before men. And he promises to acknowledge us before the Father someday. That was the gospel reading that I paired. I didn't bring that out in the sermon really, but paired that in with the Old Testament text. But Jesus is the way home. He's the way, the truth, and the life, and he's going to bring us ultimately home through the fiery trials of this life, through exile. So yeah, that was Jesus.
All right. Well, that's it for questions on your sermon. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, it's fun when I have to fill in for Michael because
Oh, no.
Instead of being the deer in the headlights, I get to be the one in the driver's seat. Just to be clear, in this analogy, the deer is not getting hit. I don't know if that popped into people's heads, but when I was thinking about that wording, I'm like, let me just be clear.
Yeah.
Just that I get to be the one asking questions. So, speaking of vehicles, if you were to get any car, what would it be? In other words, like what's your dream car?
Man, I'm the wrong person to ask this to. I'm not a big car guy.
I'm not either, for what it's worth.
And I do like a good Corvette though.
Okay.
When I see a Corvette driving around. But now I'm ticking off any Ford people, I guess, by saying that. So maybe I should say. Maybe I should have said a Mustang. I do have to share this though. What is this? Do you have like a follow up?
No,
though?
that is the question.
That's the whole
Yes,
question.
yes.
Okay, I have to say. So there was that about a week ago or so. Those car thieves from out near Sandusky. Did you hear about this?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, so it impacted our commute to school one day. Because there were, I think it was 5 vehicles that were stolen from the Sandusky area, and it was like one of them was a gray Camaro convertible, and they were mostly, I think the other cars were all Dodge or Chryslers. But they're like, a state trooper was following, I think, like identified, oh, these are some of the stolen cars. They jumped off in Avon at the exit to 611 or Colorado, there, kind of, Sheffield, Avon border, whatever. And one of the cars like hit a police officer head on. Like they were going slow enough. Like the guy was fine. Like he had to go to the hospital for minor wounds, but the gray Camaro, I think, is still at large. And my kids, because like we passed, there were like 12 emergency vehicles there that day. Like we passed them. My kids, then they were making posters at home with gray Camaro. Like they're like, can we go like put these around the neighborhood? And they asked me every day, have they found the gray Camaro yet? Every drive to school, oh Dad, I did. I saw the gray Camaro. It's over. So then they have all been talking about like what car. Like that's a pretty common thing. They want to say what car they're gonna have, and they keep asking me, and I keep saying I'm gonna get a gray Camaro someday. So maybe I'll say a gray Camaro. But no, I drive a 2009 Scion XB. It's like gotta be top 5 ugliest cars. So clearly I don't care that much about. I mean, people, if you've seen my car, like nobody is breaking the 9th or 10th commandment about coveting when they see this car.
And probably nobody's breaking in to steal it either.
Yeah. And I'm a little jealous because you had the old Saturn until recently.
Yeah.
We both had pretty, non-coveting cars.
I moved up a little bit, yeah.
You moved a little up in the world. I've still got this Scion. And it is funny because it's also, I didn't even mention, I buried the lead, it's also purple. And there's that song by Train, 50 Ways to Say Goodbye, and it does, he's like making up stories about how his ex-girlfriend died, and one of them is she got hit by a purple Scion. So that's also kind of a fun thing that my car gets called out in a making fun of it kind of way in a famous song.
You find a diehard Train fan, and that would be a valuable car.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll just say officially gray Camaro, but I'd have to paint it so I wouldn't get arrested.
Yeah. That'd be even more suspicious. Law enforcement is already onto you with your illustration.
Does he have Ethel in the car?
All right, we should end before we implicate ourselves. Suddenly I put myself into... It's just you that's in trouble, not me. All right. Well, thank you, Pastor, for joining me, and to our listeners. Next week, I will be back on the other side as the deer in the headlights, as Michael will be back in the driver's seat. God blessings on your day, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Goodbye.